We're going to record. Welcome everybody, and welcome to Amalia for joining us. And I'm really looking forward to this two-part series on Mikvah and the ways that it opens up the conversation about life cycles that we're having this spring.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rabbi Spitzer. I was wondering if you could give me host privileges so I could share my screen. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. And I'm really happy to be here with all of you tonight. It is a pleasure. I'm joining from my living room in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I'm grateful for the magic of Zoom that lets me into your living room and allows you into my living room as well. I'm going to give us a little bit of a review of what our night tonight is going to look like. So we are going to spend some time learning about Mikvah. There's going to be time where I'm going to ask you to ask questions. I'm going to encourage you to ask questions throughout this. But most of the time I'll be sharing my screen, which means I won't be able to see all of you as well as I would like. So what I'm going to invite everyone to do right now is either using the chat box if you feel comfortable with it, or unmuting if you have a question. We're a small enough group, I think it's okay. And if it gets unruly, we'll talk about it. But I want this to be a conversation. Now I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, that is just huge. Wow, that's just a lot happening right now, everybody. We're just gonna minimize that a little bit more. Technical difficulties. It's not Zoom without them. Great. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Yeah, I'm seeing head nods. Love it. Okay, I'm gonna adjust for a second. So if you can't see the screen, that's normal. There we go. Well, it doesn't want to work, it's fine. Okay, so welcome to Introduction to Mikvah with Mayim Chaim. We're gonna talk more about what that means. And I brought an agenda for all of us. So here's what we're going to do. This is actually going to last more than an hour because I know we have till 9 p.m., which is really a luxurious amount of time. If we end before 9 p.m., we end before 9 p.m. I will absolutely not keep you after 9 p.m. So here's what we're going to be spending our time learning. We're going to be learning about the biblical context for Mikvah construction. So where does Mikvah come from? We'll talk about that. We'll see Mayim Chaim's Mikvah. We're going to actually go on a tour of it. We're going to talk about how it's built and used. We're going to learn about why Jews and those becoming Jewish have been immersing for thousands of years. You don't need to share your email on the chat box with me because I will be sending all follow-up resources to Rabbi Spitzer, so you don't need to worry about anything. All right, now, remember how I said this was participatory? So far I've talked a lot, but now you're going to talk. So, what have you heard? What do you know about ritual immersion? What have you heard? And if you have an image in your mind, what is it? So when somebody says the word mikvah, if something pops into your mind, what is the thing that pops into your mind? And it's okay if you don't actually have any sort of thought about it. Then I invite you to just say, I don't know, or put a bunch of question marks in the chat too. That's okay. But this is when we get to say all the things that we might think about mikvah. You can unmute.
Well, the first thing I think about is just water.
Water. Great. It's a great starting point. Okay. So water. We're also doing some information gathering right now. Though, what do we know? What might we know? What might we not know? So water. Great starting point. Fantastic. What else? And I'm seeing our chat. The Mikvah lady. Rabbi Spitzer, do you want to say anything about that?
Well, before I got involved in Mayim Chaim and became a mikvah guide myself, I think my two associations with mikvah were, well, that I knew that my mother had a mikvah practice associated with her marriage, and that sort of idea of the mikvah lady who like has to tell you to pick hairs off your back and is going to judge you for going at the wrong time of month, or if you have an off cycle and so you're going every 6 weeks instead of every 4 weeks, somebody's going to notice. And just that sort of discomfort around the community knows everything about your intimate life.
Yeah, so invasive. That's the word that's coming to mind. Fantastic. So far we have water and mikvah lady. Awesome. Anyone else have something percolating in their mind that they want to share? Can be positive, negative, or neutral.
Transitions.
Fantastic. Absolutely. So all of these are pieces that have to do with mikvah. Fantastic. So we've talked a little bit about what we know. Water, transitions, mikvah ladies. So not so much, which is great. It's why we're here. But now, what do you want to know? What are the big mikvah questions that you would like to know? And you can unmute or put them in the chat. No question too big or too small or too shocking. Why such mystery? Asta, can you share a little bit more about that question?
Since Henry wrote it and I had no idea what he was writing, he can do that.
Great, please.
And I'll change the name as soon as I can. Yeah, well, so even when I was a witness for a conversion of a friend of ours, even then it was quite mysterious, and it was, you know, we could witness some things, but not everything. And so, and why does the water have to be pure, or what is considered pure?
So that's great. That's, Henry, that's a bunch of questions. So why isn't it that this is a very clear process? Fantastic. And what kind of water does it have to be? Does it have to be pure? If it does, why? Great. Fantastic. Amazing. Really great kicking us off. Other questions that we might have?
How can we help the Orthodox members of the community who control the mikveh understand the possibility for more mikveh use?
Tell me how you really feel, Rabbi Spitzer. Great question. How can this be something for all Jewish people? Amazing. Other questions? As we go, if questions bubble up, I welcome you to put them in the chat or to unmute and ask them. I'm curious also if folks want to share, when was the first time you heard about mikvah? Was it here? Was it 5 years ago? Was it 20 years ago? When was the first time you heard about mikvah?
A long, long time ago.
Mishka, can you share a little bit more about that?
Probably 30 or 40 or 50 years ago.
I
can't even remember. I can't remember that. You're asking too much there.
Gotcha. Okay, so you've known about it for a while, so not a new idea.
I've known that it exists. I didn't know particulars at all.
Great, that's why we're here.
There is such a thing as mikveh, and it does require water, and it was, whatever it was always thought of in a very negative way about women needing to, quote, purify themselves.
So we've just uncovered some more. Amazing. Thank you, Mishka. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
So something also about, I appreciate you naming that, something with women and maybe they have to be pure. And and really placing that right in front of us right now, that's really important. We're naming ideas and assumptions that we have around mikvah. Fantastic. So that's a really common one. Really great. Rabbi Spitzer?
Yeah, I guess the first time that I immersed in a mikvah was the mikvah of the Holy Ari in
Wow.
In Tzfat.
Yeah.
I was 15. I was there on a teen trip. We were spending Shabbat in Tzfat, and our trip leader brought a whole bunch of us on Friday night after Shabbat started, in the middle of the night, and it sort of felt like we were sneaking in because the mikvah was definitely closed on Shabbat.
Sure.
And we all went and took turns immersing in the mikvah of the Holy Ari.
Wow.
So, it's a frigid, it is a natural spring mikvah and then they built a building around it, and I guess after that I just assumed that all mikvahs were cold. So,
Cold. And was it particularly clean or?
Well, it didn't strike me as being any different than any other sort of hole in the ground that you might jump into.
Love it. A hole in the ground. Fantastic. Okay. So
my mother, when I was a child, my mother would tell me about going to the mikveh with her mother in their shtetl in Russia, in Belarus.
Oh, wow.
And how when her mother came out, the mikveh lady would say kosher. So there is a little story. My grandfather was a cattle broker, and it was very important when he went to have the cattle shocheted. And so my mother went with her father to the shochet, and so she had seen that, and then when she went to the mikveh with her mother, and they said her mother was kosher, she got very upset.
Wow, that is wild. What an amazing, I love this story for so many reasons, not in the least because I have a friend who's becoming a shochetet, that's a female ritual slaughterer. And just the thought of her saying that over an animal and a mikvah, that's wild. Thank you, Anita. And so also something that belonged to another generation. I think we can name that also. That I haven't really heard people other than Rabbi Spitzer talk about their own experience with mikvah yet, which is fine. But this reflection of, oh, my parents, my mother, this belonged to somebody else, but not to me. So we're going to talk a little bit more about all of that. But for now, I encourage you to keep unmuting, keep sharing. This is really generative, and I'm curious to hear more from each of you as we keep learning together. So I asked you what you might know about ritual immersion. I asked you what you want to know. I encourage you to keep asking what you might want to know, but I have not yet defined what a mikvah is. So for all of you listening in at home, here is our definition. When I say the word mikvah, this is what I'm talking about. Can I have somebody unmute, please, and read our basic definition?
A mikveh is a gathering of water used for ritual immersion by Jews and those becoming Jewish at the moment of conversion.
Thank you, Anita. So, as Anita beautifully read, that is what I'm talking about when I say the word mikvah, a gathering of water used for ritual immersion, meaning an immersion that is done a certain way. There's ritual involved in it. Who does the ritual of mikvah? Jews and people who are converting to Judaism. Mikvah is a full body ritual immersion, meaning our whole bodies go into the water. How do they go into the water? The way we were born, which is to say wearing nothing at all. So that might be a really vulnerable experience. And we're going to talk more about that. Now, where do we get the idea of mikvah? Is it something that we decided on in the shtetl? Is it something that we decided on in America? Is it something that we just kind of made up as a Jewish people? No, of course not. It comes from Leviticus, specifically Leviticus 11:36. This is the source of mikvah. When people ask you, where do ritual baths in Judaism come from? You can now tell them, I know exactly where they come from. They come from Leviticus 11:36. So can I have somebody unmute, please, and read in whatever language is comfiest to them, Hebrew, English, or transliteration, our verse from Leviticus. And this is not a trap. This is not a, let's see who can read Hebrew best. This is a, let's hear a voice that's not mine.
Ach me'ayanu vor, mikveh mayim yeh tahor.
Thank you, Alexandra. Beautiful. And I'll read the English because Alexandra beautifully read the Hebrew. Only a spring or a pit in which waters gather will be ritually pure. This is it. This is our source. So, oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. We're back. So Rabbi Spitzer mentioned that I'm in rabbinical school, and I'm going to invite all of you into rabbinical school with me right now. One of the big projects of the rabbis for the past 2,000 years has been to look at verses in the Bible, in the Torah, and say, every word here matters. So why is that word here? That's really interesting to me. I need to know more about that word. So we're going to do that now. And you cannot go wrong because all of the words here matter and are there for us to notice. So I'm going to invite you to either unmute or put into the chat box, what words in this pasuk, in this verse, do you notice? And you can use whatever language is comfy. So if English is the language you want to work in, fantastic. This is a very solid translation. So I welcome you to point out what words stick out to you.
I love the waters gather.
Do you want to, can you say a little bit more about why you like it? What sticks out to you about it?
There's a sense of waters wanting to be together, waters coming together. Swirling, an eddy kind of thing.
That sounds really intimate and loving.
Yeah.
And actually, mikveh literally means gathering, literally a gathering. So you're really right there. So Henry and Estep, pit, gathering, purity. We're going to use the language of ritual purity here. Fantastic. Anyone else? There's a couple of other words that we haven't. Bore. So Joseph, who is thrown into a bore, a pit. Fantastic.
One thing that I think is interesting is that Mayan Ubor, to me, one of them sounds like it's man-made and one of them sounds like it just happens to be there. That's where the waters, come out of the ground.
Amazing.
So it implies you can use one that's happening in nature, or you can dig a hole and make one.
Fantastic. So we have a pretty big division there. We have something natural versus something dug into the ground, and maybe is empty, as our Spitzer is saying. Fantastic. Anyone else? There's one word we haven't really noticed yet. I don't want it to feel alone. Yes. Only. Yes, Henry.
Well, I just heard the word only, so it's like, there it is.
My apologies for jumping.
I did have another question. I had a question. Does it matter what kind of water?
Great question. That question we're going to start exploring right now. So thank you for opening that up for us. So thank you for also engaging in the rabbinic tradition, everybody. We're going to really do a deep dive, pun intended, into these words. All right. So, only these types of water can be used. What types of water? Ma'ayan, a spring, natural moving water. Okay, what's natural moving water? Oceans, rivers, lakes. So if you have been in an ocean, a river, or a lake, you have been inside a kosher mikvah, a mikvah fit for ritual use. When I say kosher mikvah, that's what I mean. A mikvah fit for ritual use, a mikvah that I can immerse in. So how many of us have been in an ocean, river, or a lake? I think every single one of us have been inside a kosher mikvah. What's that?
Not recently.
Not recently. Okay, that's fine. Leon, yes? Oh, were you raising your hand for
yeah, no, just raising my hand.
Awesome. Great. So we've all been inside, whether a very long time ago or quite recently, a kosher mikvah. Fantastic. So that's what we have. That's what kind of water we're talking about when we talk about water in a ma'ayan. But what about a bore, a pit? So something dug into the ground where the waters gather. So the waters of the pit have to gather and remain still, unlike an ocean, which is constantly moving. Mayim, water and nothing else. So it has to look and feel like water. There's all of these absolutely fascinating conversations I've had with 4th grade students that come for religious school to Mayim Chaim, and I ask them, can you have a mikvah filled with chocolate milk? According to this verse, can I have a mikvah that is kosher for ritual immersion filled with chocolate milk? And the answer is, I'm seeing some head shakes of no. That is correct.
Very sad.
Yes. Although I encourage you, if you want to have a mikvah filled with chocolate milk, please go ahead and let me know how it went. So yes, it has to be mayim. It has to look and feel like water. So it also can't be so muddy that it's just mud and it's not water. All right, yihiyah shall be, both of these, the mayan and the bor, the spring and the pit shall be tahor, pure or ritually ready. So what the mikvah itself is tahor, is pure, and what comes out of it is ritually ready. I forgot who mentioned earlier about, oh, it's about women and like being told women and purity. And it's, yeah, so Mishka said this. And so that idea is a very far removed concept from this verse. But this is where some of that comes from, of the idea of being pure. But we really use the language at Mayim Chaim of ritually ready. There are moments in our lives when we are not ready for something to happen. And mikvah is a powerful tool to help us feel ready for a change, for a transition, for something that's in flux in our own lives. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I want to tell your faces. Awesome. And I'm going to ask everybody to mute because I'm going to share my screen and we're going to watch a video. And oh, I see Alexandra says nothing about depth, but there's a difference between the standing water in my backyard and a real lake. Yes, and one of those is a kosher mikvah, but only one of them. Actually, they could both be depending on how much water. We're going to talk about how much water does a mikvah need to be a mikvah fit for ritual immersion. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. It's going to be a video. I'm hoping the internet doesn't lag so we can watch it smoothly. It's going to be our previous Associate Director of Education, Lisa, talking about mikvah, and she's going to share how Mayim Chaim's mikvah is built. It is one way to build a kosher mikvah. There are many, 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 many ways. This way is particularly special. You'll see why. But we're going to go a little bit more into Henry's question now about water, about what kind of water. And we're also going to go into Alexandra's note about how much water do I need? And I also want to say that we're going to be touching on a little bit of what Rabbi Spitzer said about how might we have a mikvah that I want to go to and want to go inside. So we're all muted. Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. All right, that is not the tab I needed. I always wish during this moment that I could play like a little hold music while I do this. Alas. All right. Oh, and it's always the wrong size. It's just, hey. All right, here we go. Everyone ready? All right. So let's learn about Mayim Chaim's mikvah construction and how we have built our mikvah.
I'm here to talk about the halachic Jewish legal design of Mayim Chaim's mikvah. Our model, among the many that exist to build a kosher mikvah, is called hashakah. This in Hebrew translates to cause to kiss. Okay? If you have ever met an Israeli person who loves you very much, they might say to you, "Ten li neshika, give me a kiss." So that's where that's coming from. And now we're going to figure out what is kissing what in this model. Before I show you this diagram, I just want to point out that early mikvaot were natural bodies of water like oceans, rivers, and lakes, or a pit in a cave that collected rainwater. Now, there are some serious issues with this that I'm sure you can imagine. For example, it's really hard to keep these types of water clean. It's cold outside occasionally, and the temperature. So halachic design of mikvaot has really evolved to address these pitfalls, pun intended. Okay, here we go. So we're going to build or dig a hole into the ground, a pit. This is called our bor ha'otzar, our pit of collection. What are we collecting? Rainwater. We're collecting rainwater because we need mayim chayim, living water. So we've got the rain, we've got the pit, but of course we need a certain amount. We need 40 seah, 40 seah, which translates roughly to 200 gallons. 1 seah is about 5 gallons. Now, is this number arbitrary? No, of course not. The Talmud has a whole conversation about how we need a certain amount of water because we need a person to be able to get fully immersed. And 200 gallons is a fair bit of water, and we think that that's enough. Okay, great. So we've got this water, we're ready to go, right? Now, there's a problem. This is still outside, it's still hard to clean, it's still hard to control the temperature of this water. So, we're gonna do something. We are going to build an addition. And this is going to be our bor hatvila, our pit of immersion. And here, we can do a lot. We can add stairs, we can have a handrail, we can have an area here where we can have an aquatic lift for people who use wheelchairs. And we can have clean, warm, filtered tap water in this pool. And this is where people immerse. So that's very comfortable. But unfortunately, this is not ready for immersion because tap water is considered drawn water, mayim she'ovim. And actually, we need mayim chayim to have a kosher mikvah. So here's the design element. Here's the kissing part. We are going to build a connection here. And when a person is in the bor hatvila and they're about to immerse, the first thing they do is they open up this handle and the mayim chayim just has to touch this water, the Newton City tap water. And when it does, it changes the status of all of this water to mayim chayim, living water, okay? And now you're ready to go. You close it back up and you're ready to go, okay? Now, as a mikvah guide, you might get asked by guests who come, can I trafe the mikvah? And it's really important for you to know how to answer that question, okay? So one of the things to know is that, as you probably remember, in Leviticus 11:36, which you'll have studied, it says, Mikveh mayim yehiyeh tahor. This gathering of water will be ritually pure. And what that means is that the design of this mikvah is actually impervious to ritual impurity. And one of the ways that the Talmud discusses this is that the actual design elements are going to avoid things that take on impurity. Some of those things are wood, metal, and clay. Another thing, vessels. There's no part of the mikvah that can be considered a vessel that has its own integrity and can actually be detached from this structure. It is all built as one. Another thing, it's in the ground. These are just some of the main elements that ensure that the mikvah is built in such a way that it is lo mekabel tuma. It cannot take on ritual impurity, and that is why, biblically, if you're going into the mikvah ritually impure, you can come out ritually pure, tahor, and not have any kind of impact on this actual structure. I hope that helped you understand. Bye.
Thanks, Lisa. So that's a lot of information. And I want to pause here and ask if anyone has a question or a clarification, or Lisa said something that you didn't quite understand. Henry?
So once someone has immersed in the mikvah, is that water then impure for someone else?
No. The water, the mikvah and what it contains, the entirety of it, does not retain any sort of ritual impurity. It remains the way it was, which is ritually pure. It's a great question. Did I answer that in a way that you understand, or should I clarify? Okay.
That's good.
Rabbi Spitzer, question?
Yeah, is there a time, an amount of time that the hashakah, the kiss of the waters, has to occur for in order for this to work? And how often do you have to do that? Like if I do it once at the beginning of the day, is that enough for the whole day? Do I have to do it before every immersion? Do I have to keep the hashakah open for the entire time that I'm immersing, or can I just open it and then close it?
Great questions. Okay, I think there were 3 questions here. So one of the things that makes Mayim Chaim unique is we do not require witnesses. So let's go back to this idea of a mikvah lady for a minute. First of all, we have guides of all genders. Rabbi Spitzer was a guy. So we use the word guide because it's gender neutral. And we have a policy that if somebody is coming to immerse for any reason other than a conversion, which is then the clergy presiding over that conversion will make this decision. But any reason other than a conversion immersion, somebody gets to decide if they want to witness in the room. So because we do not know if somebody remembers to turn the handle each time to make the mikveh a kosher mikveh, we tell everybody who comes to immerse to turn the handle, because we don't go into the water ourselves when we open the mikveh each day to turn the handle. And without letting in that mayim chayim, that living water, which is rainwater, it's rain or snow melt, because we're in Boston, we can't know if somebody has changed the status of the mikveh. So every single person who comes to Mayim Chaim has the opportunity to change the mikveh into being a mikveh fit for ritual use, a kosher mikveh.
Which is kind of a nice step in and of itself.
Yeah, I personally love it. And as far as how long you have to turn it for, it's not a length of time. It is literally just so the waters touch. So there isn't an amount that needs to come in. There isn't like a length of time. I always tell, we're going to see a little bit more of like, what does that look like in the water? But I always tell people, if you stand by the spout, you can feel it happen, because the water is in the mikveh, in the bor hatzila, the pit of immersion that's inside, that is warm water. It's warm, like 98 degrees, which is the temperature of a human body, because we want you to be warm in the water, but we also don't want you to get too hot. So it's basically perfect. And the water outside, think about, you are all in upstate New York. Think about water in the winter. It's pretty cold. You'll be able to feel that moment when the living water comes in and touches the Newton City tap water that we've also filtered and cleaned, and there's pool chemicals in there. We'll talk more about that. Mishka, yes.
Is this a unique design for Mayim Chaim, or are other mikvaot do they operate in the same way?
Of the hashaka process?
Or is this just a new design that has come about?
The Albany mikvah is very similar.
Oh, they also have a hashaka model?
I think so.
Oh, whoa. So it is more unique. I'm kind of a mikvah nerd, and anywhere I can immerse, I will try to. Anywhere where I don't have somebody who has to be in the room with me, I will try and immerse. Maybe I should modify that statement. But Mayim Chaim is the only mikvah I've immersed in where you actually change the status of the water. So that's cool to know that the Albany mikvah is like.
No. You don't do it in Albany.
Oh.
I believe that they have it's a 2-bore mikvah.
I see.
But it happens before you get there.
Yes. So Mayim Chaim is unique in the fact that we have people do it. Right. That's a really big deal. Henry asked a great question. Is chlorine required for health and safety? I was wondering when that one was going to come up. It's not required, but we act as if it is required. So we have pool chemicals that have been calibrated for our mikvah. So when you walk into the building, it kind of smells like a pool. And we have a pool guy who is very skilled in cleaning and understanding and fixing our mikvah. And once a month, we dump out all the water in the mikvah, and the mikvah is cleaned and then refilled. And also, if let's say there's a child in the mikvah and the child has an accident, that mikvah is closed off, dumped out, cleaned, refilled. And we have a little butterfly net that we use as a hair skimmer. So if there's a little piece of hair floating on the water, we can take that out before somebody comes in. I'm loving the cats that are joining us. I am very appreciative of all of them. So let me take us back to Mayim Chaim. And I'm going to take us on a little virtual tour. Rabbi Spitzer, this will be familiar to you. And if we were at Mayim Chaim, I would welcome you through our front doors and offer you some tea. But this is the best that we can do right now. And I welcome you to visit if you ever can make it to Boston. But for now, I'm going to take us on a quick tour. And while we're on this tour, I'm going to ask you to tell me at the end, where does the Mayim Chaim live? Where do we keep the living water that we need in order to have our hashaka process, our waters kissing process for the mikvah to be kosher? And now let me share my screen again. I'm sorry, where did that go? Virtual tour. Here we go. Okay, I'm just gonna expand this a little bit. Share screen. I'm gonna make that a little bigger for us all. There we go. That's better. And a little bit bigger. Oh, Zoom, please. Why? There you go. All right, here we go. Welcome to Mayim Chaim, everyone. So Did everyone catch where we keep the Mayim Chayim, the living water? Somebody want to unmute and share? Mishka's cat.
Was it that side bricked wall?
So right so that wall right on the bottom, there's what looks like a little moat. And that is the Bor Hautzar. And it's actually 6 feet deep. Oh. But because people walk by it and there's children and safety, it's there's really only, you can only ever walk in, if you were to walk into it, it's only ever like 4 inches of water. It's stored underneath. But yes, that's exactly where it is. I also want to say that when we were founded in 2004, we built the building, we built the mikvaot, and then we waited for it to rain. Because even though we had our beautiful mikvah, we didn't have a way of making it kosher. We needed the mayim chayim. So we had to wait for it to rain, for there to be enough water for us to start having immersions. So at Mayim Chayim, we are always very excited when it rains because it means that the borot, the pits, will fill up. All right, so we have talked about many things so far. We've talked about where mikvah comes from. We've talked about our different questions, assumptions, types of mikvah, but let's start thinking about how does this actually work? Now, I'm going to be talking specifically at the lens of Mayim Chayim, which might be a little bit different than how people experience it in Albany. And I understand that and honor that, and that's completely fine. But I think Mayim Chayim has a really good model of mikvah. So if mikvah is something that you are interested in doing, I really, really suggest doing it at a place where you'll be able to have this kind of beautiful experience. All right. And before we continue, does anyone have a question about what we saw in our video? Now I can see all your faces.
I'm still a little bit curious. It's not just enough for the waters to meet, right? Some of the water actually has to flow in. And if that's the case, is there a ratio of how much comes in from versus how much is actually in the Bor HaTfilah?
Great question. There's no ratio. The waters really just have to touch. And because of how gravity works, it's not a small amount. It's like you can kind of feel this bubble of water that comes out. But there isn't like a specific amount. So it's literally turning the handle, water rushes in, and then turn the handle back. So we don't lose all of the Mayim Chayim. But beyond that, it's not like it has to be this amount, things like that. And remember, it's water that's coming in uninterrupted. Because once you turn that handle, it can just flow in and the waters can touch each other. So it isn't like, oh, I'm bringing in like a cup of water and dumping it into the mikvah. That wouldn't create a kosher mikvah, a mikvah fit for ritual use, because that's drawn water versus water that is natural water that is just moving towards the Newton City tap water. Did I answer your question, Alexandra? Is there a way that I could make that a little clearer?
I have an engineering background, which will not surprise you, but it is gravity assisted and you're flowing water down from the outside bore into the mikveh because you don't want water flowing out from the immersion pit into your collection pits.
Yes, correct. Correct. Yes. And it's a little PVC pipe if you're interested in the building materials. Okay. So fantastic. Anyone else have a question or a comment before we continue? Clarification, perhaps?
No.
I have a question. There are there's supplies, there's the robes, so there has to be a charge or a donation. How does that work?
How do we have such a beautiful building and not charge hundreds of dollars, you ask, Anita?
Yes.
Great.
Besides fundraising.
Actually, the answer is fundraising. We don't make our money on a mikvah. It's not lucrative. If you want to get rich quick scheme, it is not a mikvah. But we have a suggested donation. Yeah. The way that works, though, is after somebody immerses. Only after do we offer that you can make a donation. And we have the way that we set up our forms and payment, we actually don't know how much somebody pays. So someone might pay nothing. Some people might pay far more than $36. Some people may pay $5. And the reason why we have financial accessibility is because we believe this should be open and offered to every member of the Jewish community. And not every member of the Jewish community is wealthy. So that's one of our values is ptichut, openness. So it is really a suggested donation, and truly a donation. So yes, it really does come from grants and from fundraising and from donors, and not from people immersing. Great question. Yes, that's how we pay for it. And all of those things right now, unfortunately, people are not able to use. We're not having preparation happening at the mikveh right now because of COVID. We want to minimize exposures. But in non-pandemic times, we really do have beautiful preparation rooms. There's towels, there's robes, there's a very large sheet we're going to talk about. And all of those are ways to prepare with beauty and with respect for one's body. So let's say you've decided to come to the mikveh to immerse. And you're coming to the mikveh to immerse because you are, is there a life transition anyone can think of that one might go to the mikveh for?
Rabbinic ordination?
Perhaps it's June 6th, then your entire class is coming to the mikveh for rabbinic ordination, which is what my class is doing. So, Mishka, yeah?
Finishing chemo.
Finishing chemo. That is, we have a whole ceremony for that. Thank you. So let's go with that one.
I guided for the Hebrew College class immersion once. It was fun.
Yeah, we're a fun crew. So let's use Mishka's transition of finishing chemo. So you go online, you make an appointment at Mayim Chaim, and you show up, and your guide, who's of the same gender as you, will greet you. And pre-COVID, we'll offer you tea or water or a snack because we want you to feel at home. We want you to feel comfortable. And if it's your very first time coming to the mikveh here in Boston, we'll offer you a tour because we don't believe that somebody should come, immerse, and not really understand where they are. And so we want to make sure you know where you are and what's going to happen before you take off all your clothing and you have a full body ritual immersion. So you've been on your tour, and then your guide will take you to a preparation room. We have 4 preparation rooms. And each of these preparation rooms is fully stocked. So it's a private space that's just yours. Once the guide closes the door behind you, the guide will then go back to the front desk that we saw in the video, and you'll be alone in the room to prepare. How does one prepare to immerse? Well, traditionally, you might remove anything that can come between you and the water. And in Hebrew, that's called a chatzitza, a barrier. We don't want any physical or maybe even emotional or spiritual barriers between us and the water when we immerse. So we might clean our bodies, and by doing that, we'll have taken off our clothing, we'll have maybe taken off makeup, nail polish, all of these things. And if during this process of preparing, we have a question, you don't have to put on all your clothes and like run to the front desk. There's a phone. In each of the preparation rooms is a phone. And on the phone, it says in very large letters, dial 200. It tells you what to do. So if I, as I'm preparing to immerse, have a question, I can just pick up the phone, dial 200, and I'm immediately connected with the front desk. And I can ask the guide, hey, can I have an extra towel? Or I forgot this thing, could you grab it for me? Or there isn't any preparation, like kavanot for preparation here, intentions for preparation. We're about to talk about that. Could you bring that? And so, or maybe I might ask, could I have the immersion ritual for upon completing chemotherapy? And the guide will say, yes, fantastic. And then they'll hand it to you through the door and you're good to go. So you never have to leave your preparation room until you're ready to go into the mikvah. And our preparation rooms are designed for people of all sorts. So we have one with families, for families and kids. We have a baby bathtub. We have baby towels. We have baby shampoo. It's the cutest room. And we also have a room designed for folks with physical disabilities because not everybody has the same mobility. So somebody who's in a wheelchair or in a walker is going to need a little bit more space and needs to navigate space differently than somebody who's just able to walk around. So our physical disability space is there's no ledges or stairs, there's nothing to trip over, there's no carpet, and so it's really and there's also a shower chair, and the shower is big enough to sit down in on the shower chair, and there's a handle in the shower, so it really matters that everyone could do this ritual. And if somebody who comes in a wheelchair wants to immerse, we also have an aquatic lift that can be put onto the side of the mikvah, and then that person can sit in it and be lowered down into the water. Now, we talked about removing things that might come between us and the water. So I might take off my flower, my earrings, my rings, but anything that's been on my body for 30 days or more is considered part of my body. So if I never take off my wedding ring, that is considered part of my body. And I don't need to take it off. But at Mayim Chaim, I also have a choice. I might say, you know what? It's like, I have a lot of significance to this necklace. I take it off at night, but I just don't want to take it off in the water. That's your choice at Mayim Chaim. You get to decide what barriers you want to let go of when you visit. So we have 7 kavanot for mikvah preparation, 7 intentions for mikvah preparation that guide everyone. This is in every single preparation room, and it's laminated so it can get wet because there's a lot of getting wet, getting ready, of showering and brushing your teeth, things like that. So could I have somebody unmute, please, and read number 1, the orange and the black? And it's a little small, I'm sorry. You realize that now.
Hineni, here I am. Take a minute and think about the transition mikvah will help you mark today. Immersion in the mikvah represents a spiritual transformation from one state to another. In traditional language, your change is from ritually unready, tameh, to ritually ready, tahor. Prepare yourself by writing in a journal, saying a personal prayer, or reading something of meaning to you. Breathe deeply, sigh audibly.
Thank you, Rabbi Spitzer. So in getting ready for the mikvah, this is the very first thing. It's just arriving. It's presence, which can be the hardest, for me, the very hardest thing to do is just being present in a space. And we're not going to read all 7, although I will send all 7 later. It'll be in some follow-up resources, but these are to guide through each of the steps of getting ready to go into the water. And if one is coming for celebrating or marking the end of chemo, I might be carrying something. I might be carrying a lot. And I might use these kavanot to start letting go so I can come into the water in a way where I've put down some of the barriers or some of the baggage or some of the pain or whatever it is. Now, you are, yes.
The immersion in the mikveh is, the waters aren't magical, but the experience can be. And I've found that taking these 7 steps seriously makes the
Agreed.
magic happen. Like when you don't do it, it's less magical.
It's about the process of getting there. And these kavanot, these intentions, take us through that process. And we also understand that people can come to the mikvah and have never done this ritual before. And so it's also a really great way of going through, how do I do this? Until you find yourself wrapped up in a really big sheet and you've done all of the steps. Now, in front of us is a person with hair that looks kind of wet, and they're covered in this really big sheet. It is a huge sheet that we give people because bodies come in all shapes and sizes. And this person is wrapped up in their sheet because if they've chosen to be witnessed, we want you to be fully covered when somebody comes into the room. Now, before you go, Rabbi Spitzer, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I share after.
Okay. Yeah. So before you go into your preparation room, after you've had your tour, we're rewinding for a little bit. Before you go into your preparation room and start preparing to go into the mikvah, your guide will ask you, do you want a witness? And you get a choice. You get to say yes or no, or I don't know. And if you don't know, before you go into the mikvah, before you walk through your private entrance to the mikvah, you call the mikvah guide. Because in pre-pandemic times, there were lots and lots of people coming to the mikvah. If there are lots of people coming to the mikvah, there might be someone in the water. Okay, well, I don't want to be walked in on. And the way that we've prevented that from happening is before anyone leaves their private preparation room to go into the water, they pick up that phone again, they dial 200, just like it says on the phone, and they say, hi, I'm ready to go into the water. And the mikvah guide will say, there's no one in there, go right in. Or they'll say, someone's in the water, I'll call you back when they're done. And right there, we've protected everybody's privacy. Because now no one's going to walk in on you. You're not going to walk in on anyone. And that privacy and that the sacredness of people's privacy is maintained. So if you've decided that you want a witness at your immersion to mark the end of chemotherapy, you will tell your guide, I'm ready to go into the mikvah. The guide will say, great, I'll meet you there. You'll walk through your private door, close the door behind you, you're wrapped in the sheet. The guide will come through 2 little pocket doors. They'll slip in that way, close the doors behind them. And the room is private, closed. And you are wrapped in this very large sheet. Rabbi Spitzer, did you want to say something before I continue? Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate it in a minute. So now, here's what happens if somebody is witnessing you. And I'm just looking at the chat. Is baptism related to mikvah? We're going to talk about that. Henry and Asta. Great question. So I'm going to demonstrate with this handy towel I brought with me. As an example, we like to call this the sheet dance at Mayim Chaim. And as I tell the kids, no one is getting in the water. No one is taking their clothes off. But this is how I can show us what this might look like if you're at Mayim Chaim and you're being witnessed. So you're wrapped in your sheet. I am a mikvah guide, as is Rabbi Spitzer, and it would come up to you and you're still wrapped in the sheet. I literally can just see your head, just a floating head. It's a really large sheet. And I'll say to you, can I take the sheet off of your back? Or some people actually want their backs checked for hairs that might have come off as they're showering or brushing their hair, because that loose hair could be considered a barrier between them and the water. Something that small could be considered a barrier. And so somebody might prefer to be asked that. But I might also ask, can I take the sheet off your back? I'm asking for consent. If the person says yes, then what I do is this. All right, keep watch, everybody, because I'm not going to be able to see you in about a second. All right, so I do this. Can everyone see? I can't. So I'm just assuming you're nodding your heads. And so I'm standing like this the whole time. I cannot see them. And what happens is they walk down the stairs and I say to them, don't forget to turn the handle. And so as we remember, we have our Mayim Chaim, our living water in the Bor HaOtzar, in the pit of collection. The yellow arrow is pointing at it.
Oh.
And then you in the water turn the handle.
Okay, I was right.
So that can come in. So that Mayim Chaim can touch the water in the mikvah, and the whole water has now the status of Mayim Chaim. All of that takes about a second. It's like a minute, tops. There's 7 steps into the water. You can take it slowly. We have a handrail. But once you're in the water and you turn the handle, this whole time I'm just kind of standing here like this, and I'm listening. And after you finish turning the handle, now it's a kosher mikvah, you might say ready, or you might say nothing at all, and I'm just listening. And then I'm listening for a splash. Can I have a brave volunteer unmute, please, and yell splash very loudly?
Splash.
Did everyone catch that? Let's do that one more time.
Splash.
Great. So in that moment of hearing, all I do is peek over, and I'm just checking over the edge so I can make sure that their whole body is under the water. Remember, mikvah is a full body ritual immersion. And if that's true, then that means that our whole body has to go under the water, including our hands. So when I see that your whole body is under the water, and when that happens, I can just see the top of your head under the water. That's it. I'll say, kasher, perfect. That was a immersion that is considered kosher. And you might immerse 3 times, because 3 demonstrates that you're doing it with intentionality. Because you can do something once or twice because it's an accident, but 3 times is the custom of how many times most people will immerse, to demonstrate I'm doing this with intentionality and fullness. And you also might say some blessings. So you might say the blessings over using language of commandedness. Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. Or you might not say language of commandedness. You might say, I'm immersing for chemo. Is this really commanded? I don't know. So I'm not going to include that language. Or maybe you don't believe in being commanded. You might say the shehachianu. It might be your very first time doing this in your entire life. And you want to mark that with the shehachianu blessing, which we say on new experiences. Or maybe you want to mark something really big has happened, and you want to say shehachianu for that as well. Now, we actually have a ceremony that you can bring into the water with you upon completing chemotherapy. We also have one for starting chemotherapy. But I brought a few other immersion ceremonies here with me tonight to show. Yes, Rabbi Spitzer.
Yeah, I had a couple things I wanted to add. One is the big sheet actually allows room for more than one person to stand behind. Well, I guided at a immersion of a 7th grader right before his bar mitzvah, and his mother and grandmother stood with me behind the sheet, and his father and grandfather, this was a very special 7th grader, his father and grandfather stood in the room but not behind the sheet, because he was okay with that. Most 7th graders that I've ever met wouldn't particularly love that situation, but this kid was like, yeah, I want to immerse in the mikveh, and I want these people there, and anyway, so that was very special, and there was room behind that really big sheet for all 3 of us to stand there. And I also just wanted to add that, like, the role of the mikveh guide sometimes is just to stand and look and say kasher, but you can also ask for a guide to be in the room and not ever look past the sheet, but maybe you want the guide to stand in the room and sing, Or maybe you want the guide to stand in the room and play a recording of a song on their phone. Or maybe you want the guide to read a particular poem, or to help you say the blessing. And so sometimes like having another person's presence there isn't about marking its ritual correctness. It's about really facilitating the experience. Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to say is just that to me, there's something very special about not knowing. There's something very special about knowing the mikvah guide, but there's also something very special about not knowing the mikvah guide, because when it's an anonymous person, it stands for the whole community. Like there's something very powerful, I think, about why would you want to be witnessed for something like chemotherapy or any immersion that isn't ritually mandated that you have a witness. And to me, there's something very powerful about the idea of the community is participating in this event, and the mikvah guide is the stand-in for the whole community that is participating with you.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in pre-COVID times, people would not come alone. So if somebody is coming for a life cycle moment like a wedding, they might bring a whole party. They might bring like 15 people with them. And those people might stand outside of the mikvah doors that are closed, so they're not seeing anything, but they might be singing to that person. They might be saying blessings to that person as they're immersing. They might be waiting in the lobby and have decorated it with flowers and chocolate, which I've seen, and then sing Mazel Tov when that person comes through the doors after immersing. Mishka, did you have a question or a comment?
A comment, which turned some of that, to me, turned it very negative. One of my best friends, when she married, now almost 50 years ago, went to the mikveh the night prior to her wedding, had to be accompanied there and home, and watched the entire time prior to the wedding itself so that she should not in the interim defile herself. That was a very uncomfortable thing for me to learn about.
Yeah.
She couldn't be trusted on her own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's another way to think about that practice. I'm not trying to diminish how you feel about it, because it totally is uncomfortable the way that you described it. But the custom of shushbanim, or a bridal party who accompany you every step of the way through your wedding process, can be like really spiritually meaningful. And it not necessarily needs to be about lest you defile yourself. It can also be about just being there and walking through these steps, accompaniment. And, the night before my wedding, I slept in a room with like the three men who stood next to me under the chuppah, and like in a hotel room, just the four of us. And it was really meaningful. It wasn't because like lest I strayed or something. It was because they were walking these steps with me.
I think that would have been the case, except she was surprised. She was told she had to bring somebody, not quite knowing why. And when she left, it was described to her.
So I'm actually going to stop sharing because I don't want to rush through our last bits together. And we'll pick it up there next week. But I actually think, Mishka, you're hitting on a really big point, which is the power of knowing why and how we do what we do. And so much of this work that I care about deeply is so people don't feel like they come in and they don't know what's happening, because that experience is alienating. I'm hearing from you pain, and I'm hearing from you like tell me if I'm wrong, but like a desire of like, shouldn't have to be that way. And if that's true, then this work of knowing how I immerse and why I immerse, and even the sorts of immersion, that's counter to all of that. like really that's our mission, is to make sure that people don't walk in and out feeling that way of, oh, why did I have to do that? I mean, I don't know about you, Rabbi Spitzer, but as a guide, I've walked people through something very similar to this program before they've even like gotten ready to go into the mikvah. So they can walk into the water knowing exactly what they're doing. And so somebody can come to the mikvah really being like, I don't really know what this is for. My friend said to come, so I'm here. Yeah. And
the why to be there, but not this business of being watched.
Yeah. And I mean, I had my wedding during October this year, so during the pandemic. And to be accompanied by someone was actually really powerful because of all the social isolation we've been having. And I had a friend fly in from Texas, and she got tested and isolated until she had her negative test. And it was really powerful to be with her the night before, of framing to myself, of kind of reclaiming this tradition and saying like, actually, this is the last time I have with her before I go through a major life transition. And that is something that I almost wish I had spent more time thinking about and really sitting with, because something changed afterwards. And all of a sudden I wasn't single, or I wasn't unattached anymore. And that's a big difference. And again, I think that part of our power as a Jewish people is being able to say what was doesn't have to be what is. And so the experience that your friend had, which is in my opinion, tragic and sad, doesn't have to be our future. And that's, I mean, I think why we're all here. So it doesn't have to be our future either. And I'm looking at the time, and I want to answer any questions and then tell you what we're going to do next week. But I want to respond to baptism and mikvah, because that is a question we get a lot. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And that is that I believe across the board, every single religion or faith tradition has a water ritual. It's a powerful experience. Water is something that like shows up everywhere in faith. So baptism does come from mikvah. That's a transition right there. Think about it, going from not Christian to Christian. So the idea of baptism comes from mikvah, but from what I understand, there isn't the same sort of laws around it. And some are full body, some are not, but yes, it does come from mikvah. Are there any questions or clarifications or thoughts, reflections, also welcome, before we wrap up for tonight and I tell us what's on the agenda for next week? Okay. So here's what's going to happen next week. Next week, we're going to go through some rituals that Mayim Chaim has written for these transitional moments in life. We're going to talk about the 3 categories of why people might come to the mikvah. We're going to do a little bit more text study around water in Judaism. And then we are going to do a hand washing ceremony together. I want to do a mini mikvah together. So we have a hand washing ceremony that I will guide us through. There's also going to be a writing component. You can also just reflect during that. If you're not someone who enjoys writing, you can write on a notepad, a scrap piece of paper, in the sand. I don't care. But we'll be using that writing for our hand washing ceremony that we'll end with. Any questions about that? Thoughts? Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Amalia. And I just wanted to let everybody know that this program will be on our website, and also if there's anybody that you think would appreciate coming to part 2 who wasn't at part 1, first of all, it's nice to have both, but part 2 still stands alone, and so you should tell people to come. And also, part 1 will be available on the website, so people who you'd really like them to see this program can see it.
And we'll do a little
week.
review when we start, because I don't know about you, but my brain doesn't hold much. So I will not always remember everything week to week. So I don't expect that of anybody else either. So we'll do a little review, and then we'll go into our new content.
Great. And I want to thank Amalia for coming and teaching us this evening and for bringing us on this journey. And I'd like to invite anybody who wishes to join me in closing this evening by counting the Omer. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. You may stand if you choose. All right.
Adonai, in Makom, Shekichanu b'mitzvotav tivanu, Zrat HaOmer, Omer.
Hayom Arba'im Yom Shehem Chamisha Shavuot Chamisha Yamim Ba'omer. Today is 40 days, which is 5 weeks and 5 days in the counting of the Omer, which is the attribute of God that we are thinking about this evening is Hod should be Yesod, presence within connection, or humility within connection. And a quote that elevates our thinking: one with whom people are pleased, the divine spirit is pleased, and one with whom people are displeased, the divine spirit is displeased. And just a thought for journaling: reflect on how you can nourish the divine spark in yourself to be truly present in your conversations and relationships.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Shavua Tov, Shabbat Shalom. See y'all.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, Shabbat
Thank
Shalom.
you very much.
Bye,
Shabbat
Shalom.
Shalom.
Next week.